Okay, so welcome back, grade 12. We're just going to be finishing up genetics on the next two lessons. So this lesson and then the next lesson on mutations. This lesson is going to be a little bit shorter, and there's not going to be a learning check that's associated with this. This is more of kind of an interest sake, and it's also really important for application to understand, why are we spending so much time on protein synthesis, or why was the understanding of DNA such a revolutionary discovery in terms of advancing science? And really it comes down to the reason for DNA, which is protein synthesis. Okay. So now that we understand the backbone of biology, which goes DNA to mRNA, which is that little transcript, and then taking the transcript and turning it into protein, which is the series of amino acids. We're going to take a look at a couple real-life examples, okay? And really there's just going to be two of them that we go over. Okay. The two that we're going to go over are, one, how your hair grows, okay? Just kind of putting together a bunch of different concepts that we've kind of gone through. We'll kind of explain to you, well, how does my hair actually grow? Okay. And then the second one is how they're presently creating a vaccine for coronavirus. So one of my colleagues when I was in university is a doctor in Toronto, and he's working on it with a team on the coronavirus. And I had a talk with him over the weekend, and he kind of explained to me on what they're doing. So I kind of wanted to share that with you because it works perfectly with protein synthesis. Okay, so how my hair grows. So what hair is made up of, okay, and I'm kind of just showing you over here, this is kind of a close-up, an electron microscope picture. These are hair molecules, or sorry, not hair molecules, these are hair fibers coming out. So these are all individual hairs that I'm just kind of showing you highlighted there. And what they're made up of is, they're made up of protein, okay? So this is not a cell, these are not a bunch of cells, this is actually just a piece of protein. This is a long series of amino acids, okay? And the protein is, it's called a specific protein, but it's in a group called keratin. Okay, so keratin is just a generic name for a group of protector proteins that resist scratches, is water resistant. It's basically just a material that our body makes that kind of protects us. Okay, so keratin proteins, there's a lot of different types of keratin, but they make up our skin. If you slightly modify the recipe, then you can make up horns, make hair, feathers, claws. All of these different things all evolved from mutations from an original keratin code. So you had original code to make a protein, the first keratin, and then it mutates and it starts making really thick hair or really thin hair, and then turning them into horns and claws and so on. Our nails are also made of keratin. Okay. Down here at the bottom, I just kind of show some differences between different ethnic groups in their hair. Okay, so why this is the case, and the idea behind even race is the fact that if you have a certain code for hair. Okay, so say we take the Asian community. Okay, if we take their, they mostly have the code for black hair. They don't really have a lot of coding for red hair or blonde hair. And the reason for that is a long time ago, before we had immigration, you would breed with people that were local to you, okay, were people that were around you. So everybody in southern part of Asia would be breeding together, okay, and there was no one had the code for red hair or blonde hair, so we just kept getting the same code over and over again, so they're all getting dark hair. Okay, Caucasians, they had a few mutations where we all originally had dark hair, and then we started mutating and getting into red hair and blonde hair, and then that caused all the different takes, and we'll talk about that when we get into mutation. And then African hair is also slightly different. So we all have slightly different instructions for creating our hair, and that's why our hair is slightly different between people. Some people have greasy hair, some people have dry hair, curly hair, and so on. It's all made by this protein, but we have slightly different instructions of the protein. Okay, so let's get back to the main question, how hair grows. Okay. Well, this is where your hair grows. Let me get my highlighter out here. Okay. This that I'm highlighting here in yellow, this is what your hair is going to be. Okay, and what I'm kind of highlighting here is kind of basically like a hair pore or a skin pore. Okay. So this is where we're going to basically shoot out a whole bunch of protein. We're going to put in this keratin into this little area that I'm highlighting in yellow, and that's going to build your hair. Okay. Well, how does it do that? Well, along this pore are a whole bunch of hair cells. So what I'm highlighting here in red are a whole bunch of hair cells. Okay. And each cell contains a full set of DNA. It has the entire recipe. So all these cells right here, they're really only going to be making hair, but they have the instructions to make teeth, to make a heart, to make your brain. They have the entire set of instructions. They basically just ignore most of them, though, because they don't have a role of making the heart or making teeth. So they really just ignore most of the instructions they have and really kind of focus in on a select few chapters, okay, or what we call chromosomes. So although they have, all the chromosomes inside their cell, 23, they're kind of ignoring most of them. And they're like, okay, I'm only supposed to make hair, so I'm going to focus in on chromosome 8 or 9 or whatever chromosome it is. And then from that chromosome, okay, there's only a few recipes, okay, that they're going to look at, and those are called genes. And the recipes they're really going to be looking at are kind of things like, when do I replicate? How do I make hair? Okay, how do I make a mitochondria? And things that every cell has to make. But most of the time, really just going to be looking at the recipe of how to make protein. How do I make the protein keratin? Okay, or how do I make hair? So one of those genes that codes for a special type of protein called keratin, like I just mentioned. Go back there. Let me kind of do a better explanation of what's happening here. Okay, if we look at all these hair cells that I've highlighted in red, what they're going to do is they're going to use their coding. They're going to produce a protein inside their cells. And once they produce that protein inside their cell, if you remember that thing called exocytosis, okay, which was really kind of ejecting a bunch from their cell, they eject that protein in here, okay? And that just keeps injecting more and more protein in there. It's called the tertiary structure of protein, if you remember that. And then when all these different proteins from all the different cells start combining together, that's the quaternary structure of protein, and this is when your hair starts growing. Okay? So as it keeps building more and more, your hair is just going to keep growing out and keep growing out, and these cells just release more and more protein into that little pore, okay, or skin pore. So the keratin protein is made up of hair cells. It came from a set of instructions or a gene or a recipe. And these instructions over time mutate, creating the different versions. All right, so let's get to, well, where did all the different hair colors go to? So there's a bunch of different types of hair colors. Well, these instructions over time, okay, so all these cells that are right in here, okay, over time, they've made some mistakes, okay, and their instructions changed, and they could change by only a few letters, and if they did that, they make a slightly different protein, a different amino acid sequence. Well, with a different amino acid sequence, you're going to go from, say, a black hair into, say, a brown hair. And then if that brown hair mutates, now you're going into, say, a light blonde hair. And then that light blonde hair mutates, and you're going into a blonde, like a light blonde. Okay, so over time, all these different small mutations, okay, where, a few letters have changed, have created the variations in the different color hairs that we see here. Okay, now let's go through a couple different other examples, like, say, hairy people and bald people. Well, the difference between, say, someone who, as a hairy person, is basically they got a set of instructions in their hair cells to massively produce large amounts of protein. Okay, so they basically got instructions that say we need to produce large amounts of protein constantly, okay, and in all kinds of different cells. Cells on our back, cells on our neck, cells all over our face, okay? And that's what caused hairy people. Now, over time, you can have a mutation that will create you bald, and it's often more in males than females. And what has happened there is these cells right here, okay, have mutated. And once they've mutated so badly that it's not changing your hair color. They've mutated so badly they can't even produce the protein anymore. And if they can't even produce the protein anymore, nothing goes into this channel, and that's what causes people to become bald. And it's usually gradual. Okay, it doesn't happen all in like one day, because it's not like every single cell is going to mutate all simultaneously. What happens is one or two cells mutate, then over time more mutate and more mutate and more mutate and more mutate. That's why a person gradually grows bald over time. Now, you may ask, I'm sure you're having lots of different questions, and it's very frustrating not being in a class and being able to answer these questions. But one of the questions that I thought would maybe pop up is, well, why do females have less body hair than us? Why do females not have facial hair? Okay. And the reason for it is over time, females have evolved to have less hair. It's not that they don't have hair, it's just they have less hair and they have thinner hair. So a female should still actually grow facial hair. She should sometimes grow, very, very light, fine hair on their face. Okay? Or some females don't grow any at all, but most females would still have very, very small hair on their face, along with their arms, okay, and even their legs as well. Okay? It's just usually a lot thinner and harder to see than males. And why that is over time, males have chosen females that have less hair. They feel that that's more attractive. So females who have less hair, okay, they have more babies than the females that have lots of hair. And over time, that's basically created the differences that we see in sexes as to why females have less hair than males. Okay. All right. Now, the more interesting one is the coronavirus vaccine, at least in my point of view. Okay. So before we get into the coronavirus vaccine and how they're making it, we just have to recap just quickly on viruses from grade 11. Okay. So I'm just going to kind of recap a few things on viruses. One, a virus is made up of just two things. Okay. DNA or RNA, okay, it's one of the two, and protein. So it's the only two things. So if we look at the virus over here, and this is kind of a picture of what they're using for the coronavirus, it's really only two things. DNA, which is going to be right in the middle, right? Right in the middle, you can't see it. And then the rest of everything that you're seeing in this picture is protein. Okay? So virus DNA, it's just like ours, contains thousands of different genes. Inside their DNA, they have thousands of different genes that code for thousands of different proteins. You know, like we got this protein right here. Okay. There's another protein, like the gray part. That's a different protein. This little white dot right here that I'm just highlighted, that's a different protein. The yellow dots. So there's lots of different there's proteins for replication. There's all kinds of different proteins that's inside of this coronavirus. Right. So some examples that I have is there's going to be, codes for body structure on how to actually make the structure. Okay. There's also going to be instructions on how to enter respiratory cells. So coronavirus can't enter all the different cells in your body. If you get coronavirus on your skin, you're not going to get it, okay? Because the coronavirus doesn't have the instructions to penetrate skin cells. It only has the instructions to penetrate respiratory cells, which is why it's a respiratory virus. Okay? Then it's also going to have other instructions on, say, like how to hijack respiratory cells. So once it's inside, how do I take over the nucleus of a respiratory cell? Okay? Then you're going to have also instructions on how to replicate, and then, also instructions on how to create these things called viral antigens. And that's just kind of markings on a virus. So every virus basically has a marking. And it kind of basically, that marking is, it's known as a glycoprotein, if you remember that. But the marking is basically letting all the other cells know this is a virus. Okay? And all cells have markings on them. That's why we can't do blood transfusions. If you remember the markings on, say, blood type A, that's what they're saying is that your blood cells are marked with an A type. Mentioned back here, if you don't have the proteins on how to enter the respiratory cell, you don't have the instructions on entering respiratory cells, the virus won't be able to do that, or B type. Okay, so that's just a recap on viruses. Now we'll recap vaccines, on how vaccines are made. So most vaccines are made by selectively taking, most vaccines are made by taking a live version of the virus, okay, and then you selectively damage it. The key is that you're going to selectively damage it. You're going to pick which parts you want to damage, and you're not going to kill it. You just want to damage it. Okay? So now the virus is damaged, and it's not functioning 100%, and you've chosen which abilities to take away from this virus. Okay? You've brought it down to, say, 30% or 40% still alive, but you've taken away some of its abilities. Okay? Now, this damaging of the virus is done by how they do that is they go through and they mutate certain genes in the virus that prevents the virus from making some key proteins. And without those key proteins, so what they're going through is they're kind of going through and trying to get rid of some of these instructions. All right, so damaged virus is then injected into the patient, and you then take this virus that's functioning at, say, 40% or 30%, you inject this into the patient. The patient's immune response has ample time to find the right antibody, okay, or the solution to kill the damaged virus. Okay? Now, the virus is no threat to you because its ability to infect you has been removed by the doctors and researchers. That's what they do when they make the vaccine, is they want the virus to be alive, but it's taken away some of its ability to actually cause an infection in you. Okay? Now, once you've given that person the vaccine or you've given them a weakened version of the virus, your body will figure out, well, how do I fight that? Okay? And once it knows how to fight it once, it knows that for a long period of time, and then you are considered immune. So once you give that person the vaccine, if a 100% version of the virus enters your body, the body recognizes it, it knows right away how to kill it, and you're known as being immune to the virus. And that's how vaccines work. Okay? It's very similar to if you just get the virus and survive it, you've essentially given yourself the vaccine. Okay, because once you get the virus once, you can't get it again because your body already recognizes it. The problem is that we don't want to just give people viruses, and some people are going out there purposely trying to get it, which is a dumb idea, because once you get it and survive it, you are immune. But what a vaccine is that it's the same kind of mechanism, but you don't have to go through the problems of actually getting the infection. You still get the immunity. Okay, so developing a vaccine, this is what they're trying to do right now, okay? And this is why it's taking so long. But again, will probably completely change a company. So there's a couple companies that I know of, one in particular in the UK. This would be a multi-billion-dollar company, and they are risking their entire company to find this vaccine. Because if you do find the vaccine, you can patent it, and knowing that the entire world requires this vaccine on a yearly basis, you are going to be a very, very profitable company. Now, the deal is that whatever company makes it has to give it for free or at cost for the first year, which is about $2 per vaccine. So they're not going to make any money the first year. The world kind of agreed with that. And then the second year and third year, when we have to get, because once we have the vaccine, you'll get it every single year in the flu shot, that's when they can start making their money. Okay. All right. So let's go back to how they're going to make the vaccine. The first thing they had to do was they had to find a live version of the virus. And you may think, well, that's pretty easy. It wasn't easy as it may seem, because what happens is once the virus goes inside of the person's body, it's a very, very small thing. Okay? A virus is excruciatingly small, okay? Way smaller than a bacterial cell. So one, it's hard to find the virus, and as well as your body is destroying it once it goes inside the body. You can't just go find a virus sitting on the counter. You have to go inside someone's body, and then inside their body you got to find the virus and hope that the person hasn't destroyed all the copies of the virus. Okay, so that was the difficulty at the very beginning. Now we've already found the virus. Everybody's got the copies of it. Okay, so that took a little bit of time, but not much. The next thing they had to do was they had to sequence the virus DNA. So they get the DNA out of the virus once they have it, and they basically run their code. So that's what I have over here, and they figure out the entire DNA sequence of the virus. Okay, and this is what you do. If you do 23andMe, they do it on you. Okay, but we just did it on a virus. Okay, we figure out their entire code, so we know all their letters in sequence. Next thing we had to do is we had to go through this entire DNA thing and say, well, where are all the genes? Okay, let me pick a better color here, so say green. We have to identify where all the genes are on there, okay? Because not all these letters code for something. So we'd have to go through and say, oh, there's a gene there, there's a gene here, here's a gene here, there's a gene here, here, and they went through and they found all the genes. Okay. Once they found all the genes, the next step, we got to determine, well, what protein is made by these genes? Here's the set of instructions, or the genes. What does that set of instructions make? Like, what protein is made? And on top of it, once we know what protein is made, what's the function of that protein? What does that protein do for the virus? Does it help it replicate? Does it help it build its body? Does it help it infect cells? Okay. So this is open information. Everybody can get this information. This is not proprietary. You're not going to make any money off this. Everybody who's trying to find the vaccine has this information, the first four. Now, this is where the difficulty comes in, and this is what's taking so much time, is this last two steps. Is you have to, basically, the patent pending step, this is what you would patent. You determine the exact proteins that you need to be deactivated so the virus doesn't infect patients. So you have to go through and say, okay, these are all the different genes on here, and I'm simplifying it by showing you, say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 6 different genes. But in actuality, there's thousands of these. So you have to go through and say, okay, well, which ones do I need to knock out? Do I need to knock out that gene and mutate it and prevent it from making it? And do I need to knock out that one, keep that one, knock out that one, and keep that one, and knock out that one? That's what the challenge is going through and determining which proteins do I need to deactivate so the virus doesn't infect patients. So these are all the ones that I'm doing in X. Which ones do I need to mutate? Now you may think, well, let's just knock them all out. Knock out all the proteins. Okay, and then the virus is essentially useless. The problem is you would kill the virus if you did that, and you don't want the virus dead. The other thing you also have to be able to do is number 6 here, and I know the slide's got a lot of information, but I'll go through it, is you also have to determine the exact proteins that do need to be active in order for the body to at least recognize the virus and mount an attack. If you inject them with a dead virus, the body won't even try and fight it. Okay, so if it doesn't even try and fight it, then it doesn't recognize how to destroy it, and if you get the virus later on, you won't be immune. Okay, you have to have the body at least recognize that is a virus and to at least start attacking it. Okay, so these last two steps are the most difficult, because what you're basically doing, and let me kind of summarize this, is if we take a look at the virus in my top right screen here. Okay, here's the virus, and inside the virus, there's its DNA. Okay, just kind of simplified. So if we take that DNA, which is in a circle, and we line it all up here, okay, and that's what I kind of have down here in red. Okay, there's our DNA. Well, all over here, we're going to have different genes. Okay, so the different genes. So I'm going to make 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. And, well, a small little gene there. Okay. Now, those different genes code for different proteins. So say this gene codes for body structure. Let me pick a better color here. This gene codes for body structure. And we'll say this gene codes for how to enter the cell. We'll say this gene codes for how to hijack the cell. And then we'll say this gene codes for how to create viral antigens. And we'll say, this is getting messy, I apologize. This gene codes for how to replicate. Okay. So what they need to do and what they're working on is all these different teams are trying to figure out which of these do I need to knock out, okay, and which ones do I need to keep. So do I need to knock out this and this, keep this, and knock that. So they'll try that, and they'll inject it into a mouse, okay, and they'll see, oh, did the mouse become immune? No, the mouse didn't even recognize that the virus was inside it. So it didn't mount an attack. Okay, that didn't work. We're going to have to go through it again. Let's not knock out those ones. Let's take the virus and let's knock out this and this, but let's keep this, and this. Inject into the mouse. Oh, it kills the mouse. The virus is still too pathogenic, or it's too lethal again. Okay, that didn't work. And they go through and they try and knock out something else. So let's leave that. Okay? And once they actually find the solution, and they say, okay, these are the 3 we have to keep. Those are the 2 that we have to knock out. Now you have your patent pending vaccine, okay? And you're ready to start mass produce. Again, once you have this figured out, you may think, oh my God, I have it. It works, okay? And then you go and inject it and you realize, oh, it only works in people that are 30 years or older. Everybody that's under 30, it for some reason doesn't work on. So once you think that you have it, now you have to test it on all the different types of our population. You have to test it on young people. You have to test it on old people. You have to test it on middle-aged people. You have to test it on boys. You have to test it on girls. You have to test it on diabetics. You have to test it on people that are performing cancer treatment. You have to test it on people that are recovering from surgery. You have to test it on people that are taking, aspirin. You have to test it on people that, all these different types of people. You have to ensure that the vaccine actually works for all of them. Because just because it works for one person, okay, it may not work for somebody else. Okay, maybe you think you have it and you think, okay, I've deactivated the vaccine enough that it's not going to infect a person. Okay? It may not infect the first person you inject, but 3% of the population actually gets the coronavirus from injecting it. Well, then that's not the vaccine. Then you have to go back. Even if only 3% are getting it, that's not an effective vaccine. You have to go back to the drawing board, and you have to figure out a way that 100% of the population is going to work. Okay? And that's what's taking so much time. However, and they think, okay, well, that does take long, but it doesn't seem like it would be taking years or 2 years. Why is it taking so long? Figuring out. And once we do, then we have the vaccine, and we can get rid of this coronavirus. Okay? So I hope that kind of clarifies things. I'm not going to give you a learning check on this. It's more kind of for FYI and kind of connecting all the different dots.